All right. It looks like we are, let's see, you can show or hide moderation activity from here. Okay, I don't know what that means. It looks like we are live. So if somebody can please say, oh, okay, Monique, you can hear me? Yes, if you can hear me, let me know and we will get started if you can. Let me know, Monique, or anyone else who might be here. If you can hear us, say so. All right, just watching the short.
I can hear it. I can hear us.
You can hear us. Okay, so we're good. So here we are. There's Gary. Here's Emily. We're going to have some random Sunday morning banter. Nice to see you, my friend. It's been a long time.
It's been a long time. It's been like, what, like a year?
Probably. I think the last time we did a show, it was me and you and Bertie.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it was probably almost a year ago, maybe 9 months, somewhere between 9 months and a year ago. But I think just prior to your great adventure.
Oh, right. Right. That was when I was doing shows with Jason too.
So yeah, I think you had just done something like that, and then you were getting ready to go on your big adventure, which you've been on, which turned out to just be a strange loop. But since you and I haven't chatted a little bit too much, like, just can you, for my people who haven't checked in with you, you keep people abreast of your movements in your comment section and on Facebook and stuff. Like, tell people about what's been going on with you for the last year.
Well, I think a lot of people know that we had a vision, we had a dream of having land and building out the land, gardening. We were going to put hobbit holes inside of a mountain. And so I bought this little piece of land in North Carolina in a little city called Lake Lure.
So that I didn't know it was in Lake Lure, but I had a drama of my own in Lake Lure. So whatever you're about to tell me does not surprise me. Continue. I didn't know that's where you were.
Yeah, Lake Lure is a funky little lake. It's man-made, and apparently Dirty Dancing was filmed on that location.
Yes, this topic has been covered on this show before for an entirely different reason, but proceed.
So we had a truck and trailer, little RV, and we were gonna sit the RV there and just establish a little bit of stability, and then go find work and, do all the things that are involved with building out land. And it's probably good to note that neither of us have experience in this whatsoever. So this was like jumping off a cliff with our eyes closed, essentially. And everything was fine. Like, we got there without any problem, towing that giant trailer, halfway across the country. And once we were there for, I don't know, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we started, when we got into the process of doing the things we had to do, the first thing we had to do was run electricity to the camper, right? We had a generator going, and I had to go buy gas every like week or so, and that's how we had our power, right? But we needed to run power, so we're both able to leave the RV and have the cats be okay, right? And so when we started doing the research and we started calling around and emailing who we needed to start, they were just very non-responsive. So like, it took probably a week for us to even talk to anybody to get any type of feedback. And then once we did get feedback, then it just started to become quite apparent that what we got into wasn't what we thought we got into. So we bought the land as fully unrestricted. That's what the realtor sold it as, unrestricted land. And we don't have a lot of experience in this, but we took that to mean unrestricted. Like, you can do what you want with your land. You don't have to get permits for everything. You don't have to follow county guidelines, city guidelines, etc. You do your thing. And once we started calling and trying to find out about what the situation actually was, then we eventually realized that not only was the land not unrestricted, but with the county regulations, Rutherfordton, I think it was called, it was actually like more strict than some HOAs.
Oh, shit. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So once we figured that out, we were trying to brainstorm and see if there was anything we could do, like if there was any sort of remedy to the situation, because we needed electricity. It was kind of like we had to have it. It wasn't like an optional thing. We couldn't just run on the generators forever. And part of the restrictions set was that you have to start septic and you have to start a well. And then you can run electricity to the RV. And, you know, if we had had an extra 15 grand laying around, then we could have done that, but we didn't. And then also we were going to do composting toilet for the bathroom situation. And that apparently also was not allowed unless you have septic, right? Which makes no sense whatsoever, because that's the whole point of it. So eventually it became clear that we weren't able to do the whole situation like we thought. And and then the thing that finally got us to leave was we went to walk this little flower bridge that was in the city, and it was a really crazy day. Like, it was the craziest downpour I've ever seen. I've never seen, like, we were just out walking and running through it, and it was just like torrential. It wasn't like super windy, but the amount of water coming down, like, it just filled up the road and it filled up the sidewalks. We were like tromping through half a foot of water in like half an hour. It was like a flash flood type of thing, but it was fun. I enjoyed that. And then we got back to the RV, and the overhang, I don't know what you call it, canopy thing, the awning, had blown and flipped up on top of the RV. And it wasn't like too crazy, but it did kind of break the poles that hold it in place. And then the next day, I turned the AC on like an idiot without taking the awning off of the top of it yet. And whatever air it needs to suck up to work, it triggered some sort of fail safe, and then the AC just stopped working immediately. So then we took that as like the last sign, like, this isn't going to work, at least how we're trying to do it. So we had to go. We just went and found a hotel and started regrouping from that point.
So couple of things. So if I recall because I was kind of following you along on some of your little videos and posts, and you and I have occasional texts, you then you guys tried staying in North Carolina, but like moving into a more normal living situation and getting work. It was I guess what I surmised from that was that you were going to try and stay there, but try to find another way.
Right.
What happened when you tried to find another way, and then ultimately, obviously, you're now not in North Carolina anymore. So can you tell us a little, I mean, you went through some personal evolution through all of this as well, in terms of like how you want to spend your lifeblood energy and all of that kind of stuff. So like, what happened once you left the RV but stayed in North Carolina, and then how did you end up back in Colorado?
So we were originally going to try to stay, what was that city called, Andrea, that we were staying in the hotel? In Asheville.
Mm-hmm.
Asheville was the closest big city to Lake Lure. So originally we were going to find an apartment from that hotel, and, you know, kind of do the same thing that we did when we originally came to Colorado. And my mood wasn't great during that time. I just remember like just feeling down about the whole situation, and I wasn't really super motivated to try to find work. So I took a few days before I started looking, but I did eventually get into looking for work. And we finally got word from from Andrea's mom, that there was her grandparents' house was essentially sort of available. And this was also strange because Andrea has always said, like, well, I don't know if I can say that, but it was it was breaking some things that we didn't think were ever going to happen. We didn't think it was possible for us to like live in that house or live that close to people. But we did end up, it ended up being okay. Like her mom said, yeah. And we saw that as like a viable route. And so we ended up getting over there. It was 4 hours east of Lake Lure. So it's pretty close to the coast. I think only a couple hours from the coast. And it was nice. Like the house was really nice. It was big, 1,400 square foot house, and everything was good, affordable. And I had like personal issues being over there, and there were also some other circumstances which I'm not going to talk about on here. I have talked to a few people about it, and maybe I can share some more with you outside of the show.
Sure.
But it was like some level of spiritual battle that I had to go through over there. And I got through that. Like that wasn't something that sustained itself for too long, but I was having issues being able to hold work, and not because I wasn't able to do it or anything like that. Just like something different would happen on every single different job that I tried, and I would have to leave it. And I didn't see any of that coming either. It was something like 10 different jobs that I got over the period of 2.5, 3 months, something like that. So eventually, and we had already talked about coming back to Colorado a few times, like in the midst of all these jobs, but I wanted to do it, to be able to say, I don't like something being able to get the better of me, right? So I just was doing my best to push through it and to somehow force it to work. And after number 10 or 11, where a similar like energy space kept happening where I had to leave. Oh, and also I did some type of dice roll, and I wrote like Colorado, go back to Colorado, stay in North Carolina, or go back to Lake Lure. I had like 4 different options, and we rolled the dice like 120 times per go. And all 3 of the times we did it, she did it too, said Colorado. And I'm not a huge believer in that type of thing, but I just thought it was interesting that the feeling space to me felt like it was correct, and rolling those dice also matched that. And just everything that happened there, finally, I was just like, I realized that I needed to come back, and Andrea agreed. And I was able to, we have a really good friend here who kind of helped transition me back. I came back to Colorado, stayed for a month and a half, and got everything set up, came back to the same job that I was at before.
That's good. I think you liked that job, didn't you?
I did like that. I did like that job. It was, and even coming back, there were tons of different like variables that could have made it not work, and everything worked. It was difficult, and it was like hard being apart from them for a month and a half, but eventually it all worked out. And there was also a problem with the trailer. The trailer, when I had it on the land, there's like this little driveway that dips down, goes over a little stream, and then the land is a little bit like, I don't know how to say it. It's like the length of it is parallel to the road. And then there's another like half an acre up the hill, but there's not a lot of wiggle room between the road to the hill. So when we were leaving Lake Lure, I was trying to turn the trailer around, and I wasn't able to do it. Like, I don't have a ton of experience like driving trailers. I did get my CDL, and I know how to back them up. I know how to, but if you're trying to do something like this and turn yourself around in a pretty small area, I wasn't able to do it. So the trailer was backwards on the land, and we just left it there when we came here. But yeah, when we went to Window, we left it there. So it had been there the entire time. But I was brainstorming with my friend about how to turn it around, and I eventually called. Somehow I don't know why I did this, but I got the number of our neighbor because he had helped me get the truck unstuck another time. So I just texted him and I said, hey, do you think it's possible for you to turn the trailer around? And I told him I'd give him a few $100s if he could do it. And I didn't know if he was going to be able to, but he has a smaller truck with a smaller wheelbase that has a tighter turning radius. And he called me back within like 3 days, or he sent a picture and he's like, oh, it's turned around, good to go. So that was another variable that was kind of sticking, and I didn't know what to do with the trailer. So we got it off the land and we used it to put everything from that house into the RV, and we drove it all the way back here. My friend bought the trailer, so that was like also a loose end that was tied up, and that helped finance this move because moves are always expensive.
Yeah. So, wow. So it seems like you had to go, like you were at a place in Colorado where, you seem like, I mean, just for people who kind of are wondering even why I'm asking you about this as a topic of interest here. Gary and I've known each other personally for a couple of years, but followed each other's videos and work for years prior to that. And he was, going through a challenging time in his life around the same time period that like my years in the wild ended. You were in the wild of your car when I first started following your work, and you've had this progression, and you had found yourself, into a comfortable life and a good relationship and a good job. And what it seemed like to me is you felt like you just had this thing that you wanted to do, that you wanted to go try. And I like, we think we all come to points like that in our life. And I think you have to do it. You can't just be like, well, that's taking a risk, so I'm not going to do it. And sometimes they work and sometimes they don't, but there's like, lessons that continue to teach themselves to you for even years after the experience has sort of ended. I think that, again, you and I have hardly talked, so this is just me intuiting as I sort of see you making posts and little videos about it kind of thing. There's a lot of people who are in sort of our situations, positions, predicament, opinions of how this place is and how it might otherwise be and whatnot, who have ideas about a more ideal way to live. And some of that is far more complicated than we could ever imagine, right? And it can be a hard lesson. It can be very leveling. For me, it was like, my big like sort of attempt at something like that was when I was much younger and I decided I wanted to move to New York, which like isn't going back to like the land or something that you were trying to do. But New York, even for a person who comes from a city, living in New York is an entirely different way to live than even living in Los Angeles or somewhere else. And I went there for a year and I was miserable and I came home and it was hard to accept, right? Like most young people, when they grow up, they like want to get married and have a family or whatever. I just wanted to move to New York. And I went there, and not only did it not work, but it was a spectacular failure. And on the flip side of that came my lost years of heavy drug use, right? And I can't say that was the cause of it in any way, but that played a part in like my whole sort of unwinding and eventually my, finally locating myself and finding sort of my way out of things. But, people who live differently than however we were raised, like there's a lot that goes into it. Like when people who grew up in rural areas move to the city or vice versa, it's like more complicated than like, oh, that looks neat, I think I want to do that. And sometimes you can't know that until you do that, right? And sometimes those hurdles are to be overcome and you figure it out and you make that work. And other times it's like, oh, this isn't what I thought it was. And also I now recognize I really like the other thing that I had before that I didn't have the same level of appreciation for that I do now. And having to sometimes go back or go home is not, like sometimes that's a realization and you see it with new eyes. So I'm sure this has all been both challenging, but also enlightening for you, and will sort of inform, how you think about things going forward. Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of also interesting for me because I don't have too much experience dealing with failure or something not working. Generally speaking, in my life, when I try to do something, it at least somewhat works. Like it's maybe kind of half and half, but I've never had something that just was a crash and burn type situation. And it wasn't all bad. Like I wasn't just miserable the entire time. It was up and down and chaotic, but I think it was a good lesson for me because I'm not used to it. So it allowed a new life experience for me that, and again, there are other things going on there, other reasons for it that may have been the reason that we needed to go out there in the first place to fulfill that.
Yep.
And then we come back because I don't know, it was guided to some extent by the universe, by life itself. It was guided, and we're in a better place now than we were in the apartment before. Like we have the mountains straight out our back window. It's one of the only places in the city that we would even be able to have that view.
Yeah. So sometimes you have to go away to come home again. And that journey is and exactly what you're talking about is super important. And what you, I'm not going to ask you to go into it any further, but what you talked about in terms of really having to trust yourself when something didn't feel right and just be like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not doing that. Right. And stick with that, even though it was making things more challenging in the moment. These are all super valuable lessons. Like I think the most, what I'm coming to, at least in the things that are coming up for me now, is just like integrity seems to be the order of the day. When I say that, I don't mean like I'm the right person to judge what is integrous behavior or not, but like what feels right and coherent to me, right? Like if and it might be different for each person, but that coherence, that sort of being in alignment, I think is going to become increasingly important in terms of what's sort of coming with the age that we're moving into, right? And I think when someone is out of coherence with themselves, that's going to be the thing, as it always has, but I think it's going to be more immediate. That's going to be the thing that leaves them open to situations or scenarios that might not be ideal, and learning to sort of maintain your, not just your personal integrity, but literally your sort of physical, your bodily integrity, your energy field integrity, all of that kind of stuff is a valuable lesson. And so that, that is prominent in this story you just told as well. So I'm glad you made it home, and I'm glad you're wiser, and that things are good and things are better, and you made it, I'm sure it was a really good, important experience for your relationship as well, as these kinds of go through with people always are. So yeah.
Yep, it was good for both of us to have that month and a half of space, and I think it's always healthy to be able to spend time apart. I was thinking of something, but it just like flew away. What was I gonna say? I don't remember.
All right, well, let's move forward. And if it comes back, interrupt me and just say it. So I think that was good. I just wanted to catch people up on sort of what brings you to this point today, back in Colorado. And you reached out to me because you were wanting to chat. And so here I am to chat with you. So
yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting being back in Colorado because we've lived in like 4, 5, 6 different places since we met, starting off in the Bay Area. And they've all been challenging. Like every single one of them had something that was very challenging and not ideal, which usually prompted the next move to try to find the next thing. And Colorado was the best one out of all of them by far. It was the best one out of the 5. It was kind of nice to be away from both of our families. Not that we don't love them, but just it's like starting over in a new city where you don't know anybody and you just get to explore, you know? So it's interesting that we got to what was probably the best one, and then we up and left after 2 years of stability, and then we end up back here. It was interesting also because another thing I'm not used to is like doing the same sort of thing. Usually it's like a Mandelbrot set that never brings the same situation. It's always something new. So to be back here is interesting also in that fashion. And it's not even the same. Like the work situation is not exactly the same. I'm under a different contract than I was when I left. The format has changed. There are new people there. Even the whole, like how the business is being run is possibly changing. We might be getting into custom cabinetry and get a whole new big shop and move away from flooring a little bit. But it has enough elements of stability for both of us that, because we've realized, we already knew it to some extent, but you have to have some sort of base to operate from, and you can't come up with new ideas and get ready to explore or anything like that unless you have some sort of base to start with. And so we have that back now, kind of surprisingly, because of how crazy everything was, but it is like some sort of second chance. Because another thing I've realized through all of this is sort of the precariousness. Even if you're doing your best and you have help and support, the precariousness of life in this reality, it's become very more so clear to me than it was before I tried all this.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm living in Austin now, and this is depending on how you count it, the 3rd or the 4th time that I've lived in Austin. And when I moved here the very first time, I immediately recognized that I had a power here that I did not have in Los Angeles, that there is something about this place that really amplified me in right, something about myself. And I was too young and too immature and too unexperienced to really understand all that entailed. And I left and returned a couple of times. And the interesting thing about Austin is it kind of always meets me where I'm at. So if I'm in a good way, if I'm in alignment with myself, if I'm in personal and if I'm in integrity in all the different kinds of ways, then it works with me. It's almost like a jazz duo, right? Like we can jam with each other really well. When I am fucking not together, when I am showing up in a way that is not impressive or cute and whatnot, it also does that, right? It's been very difficult for me here during times when I was completely out of my tree, and it's been very great to be here in times when I'm in alignment, right? And so now I recognize that, like, if I want to make nice music with Austin, what my part of the responsibility in that relationship sort of is. But there are challenges here as well that it took me 20 plus years to understand, like, what Austin is to me and why this is a good place for me. That said, there are challenges here now that didn't exist when I first moved here. Like when I first moved here, it was a very small, cool city. Now it's a world-class city that's endlessly growing and everybody wants to live in it. So, the housing market prices have increased tenfold, right? And it has a lot of the same problems and issues that Los Angeles had, just in terms of like affordability and traffic and all of that kind of stuff. And some of the things that I liked about Austin first time around either don't exist here anymore or don't exist in the way that they did. However, like, that ability to make music with the city still does for me. And that's part of like overall quality of life. And so even though there are some parts about living here that are not 100% ideal, I am now mature enough to see that, oh, just going to a different place that maybe solves whatever the unideal thing of the moment is, like that actually isn't going to work, right? That like, this is my best stable base. This is the best scaffolding for me to project my reality onto, and learning to manage all the other things, right? Like learning to prioritize, like make decisions based on what things are actually the most important, rather than thinking that like you need to have everything, right? I have a much higher value on quality of life now than I used to. And that's like the thing that's good for me here, is like the quality of life. So even if it means a few other things aren't ideal, that is. And yeah, I think most people even people who've lived lots of different places, as have I, as have you, there's always kind of one place that just sort of things flow best for you, but requires you also showing up in a certain way, right? So it sounds like, you know, for you, at least for this period of your life, you've found that spot, and it can be your scaffolding to start to sort of build from. But you know, it's you can't know that. I mean, I'm not going to say you can't know that until you've left and come back, but I think, you know, like sometimes those things don't become clear. It took me this is fourth time. Now I finally understand, right? I was always sort of looking for some, you know, something that would be slightly more, slightly better, slightly different, like whatever it is. And maybe that one thing would be better, but everything else bottom fell out, right? So that was pointless.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, no, it takes a while. Like knowing where you want to live is really important, right? And then everything kind of, you know, stems from there. It's great to be adaptable and be able to make things work in different places, but that's different than like having a place you can really work with, right?
Yeah, I think both of us are very much ready to have the stability and really build from there, but keep it, like not throw it out the window to do something else and do the same pattern that we've been doing, because like I'm happy to stay here and still have ideas of building out land, but having it as like a getaway or an investment opportunity, rather than, oh, let's just go up and move across the whole United States, where I haven't even seen the land yet, and I don't even know what the East Coast is like, and I don't know what the humidity feels like and all that. Like that's the immaturity.
That's no joke, dude.
Yeah, that's the immaturity that you are aware of as well, where like you have an idea and it just seems amazing, but it's like the idea that I can do anything, like any idea that pops up in my head, like I can just go do it and it'll work perfectly. And I already knew that wasn't the case, but you have to try things sometimes, and whatever happens. Like I was shown very clearly through that situation that there's not like a level of me, I will do this, there's not a level of efforting that I can do. If the situation isn't going to work, that will just force it to work. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, effort is required for most things to go well, right? But there's certain situations that are like futile, right? So,
yeah.
All right. So you're there, you're happy to be there, you've got your base, and now it's create time. And you said you wanted to talk with me about some things. So what you want to talk about today, my friend?
Let me see, what did we talk about at all? Oh, that was on text. I wanted to briefly, at least briefly, talk about the financial situation and what are the possibilities moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the conspiracy people, sort of fear-mongering side, have already called out FedNow as like this furthering of the trap and whatnot, but I wanted to see what's your opinion on that, if you have looked into it at all.
I mean, I look at it. I mean, my peepers pick up and look at sort of everything, right? I mean, obviously, like central bank digital currency is like, it's not for me. I mean, some people might think it's a great idea, right? I'm not one of these people. I don't know enough about cryptocurrency to speak intelligently on it in terms of like what the possibilities are with that. For me, I'm a voluntarist. I don't think like anything belongs in the hand of the government at this point. So any digital currency that would have anything to do with the government, like I'm not really interested in that. I don't know, like there's lots of people out there who think that cryptocurrencies and blockchain technologies will provide all kinds of solutions for our problems. And then there's people on the complete other side who said, no, there's no solutions available there. It's just the road to hell, digital enslavement and whatever. Like, I think the solution is different for each person individually, right? Like, I think it's fine that these technologies are created, experimented with, worked on. I don't like I don't like it. I don't think it's okay for them to become mandatory in any way. And by that, I mean, like, if somebody wants to have their own business and they decide for their own self, their business selling widgets or whatever, that they only want to take payment in cryptocurrency or in FedNow or whatever, like all these things are going to exist. Like you or me or whatever, not wanting them probably won't stop them from existing. But I don't like the idea that become sort of required for people to engage in general life and obtain services. Like if you're selling, chocolate chip cookies out of your house and you want to only take crypto for that, I think that's fine. But I don't think it's fine for the electric company or the telephone company or anything like that to demand that people only pay digitally or with FedNow or whatever it is, right? Like, I think like the path forward that seems like the one that I don't know. I don't even know to say like the most reason. I don't even know what's reasonable anymore, but like, I don't like the idea of being forced to do something. So I think all things should be opt in or opt out. Right. And that someone can create them, but no one can be forced to use them. And I think, a good amount of awareness about what these things really are and what they actually do is important. And then that also is incumbent upon individuals to avail themselves of that knowledge. Right. Like, so it's a hard thing. Like there's so many things going on and most people don't have the time to like look deeply into every issue or topic. And so like the only thing I can think of that would be like something that, and this sounds crazy too, most sane people should agree on, and there's very few of those around, so it's hard to imagine, is that things should not be mandatory, right? Things should be opt-in. If people want to do things the analog way, there should be an option for that. If things want to, be done digitally, there's an option for that. If people want to do central bank digital currency and the government wants to give them attaboy tokens for being good little digital slaves, like that, okay, but not if that's something that you're forced onto, or I don't know, like, I don't know what the solution is here. I think the answer is going to be different for each individual, and each individual is going to have to decide at what level they want to engage with individuals, systems, politics, society, all of that kind of stuff, right? Like it's kind of like I don't think there's a one size fits all or a 2 or 3 options. Like I think everybody needs to have the option. There needs to be a choice point with everything, right? And that we should be pretty clear on like not wanting to create scenarios that force people into something that they don't want to do, right? That they don't understand. Like a lot of people agree to things because they don't actually understand them, right? And so like in the medical realm, they call that informed consent, but like maybe, and people don't follow those rules all the time anyway. But I think we'll probably need informed consent about a lot of other things now, right? Because everything is so kind of wild and out there. But I don't think there's a one size fits all, this is good, that's bad answer to any of the problems we have right now. Go ahead.
No. I was just gonna say that like that's the whole entire idea behind not allowing monopolies, right? And yet when you look at the system, who owns what, who owns this conglomeration, and who owns those whole, it's like an umbrella thing. Like there's one company at the very top that basically owns the entire world. And I mean, the C thing that happened over the last 3 years showed me that this realm is united, like in some way. In some way, all of the countries are united. So if that's some invisible power structure pulling strings, or however it may present, it's not as diverse as the eyeballs will tell you. But at the same time, within our local environment, like if we want to buy something, we still have options. We can try this store, that store, the other store, or we can buy raw materials and try to make something ourselves. You know, there's still plenty of room for individual autonomy in the system as it is now, even though it's difficult. So long as that remains, and the forcing thing, like I feel like force and violence is that's like the lowest common denominator level of trying persuasion or like coercion. It's like deceit-based operations.
Right. So obviously, like things when we're dealing with like government or large institutions that have tremendous power, like force is different than like if you go to a restaurant and they just have a QR code and they're not giving you the option of a regular menu, right? Like
Right.
That's a little bit different, but like kind of I'm getting to the place in my own head. It's like, I don't think I want to go to the restaurants that only give me the option of the QR code. Right. I mean, there's I know that lots of people like the all cash Fridays, right? There's a bar that like we like to go to here that, you know, they have a sticker up that says you should never support businesses that don't accept cash. Right. And so I think it's fine that businesses take other things besides cash, but if they don't take, and sometimes I pay with a credit card or whatever it is, but I like the option of cash. I don't like when you go to those restaurants that don't want to give you a service from a person, even if it's a sit down restaurant, they want you to like order on the computer and then go to your table, and they want you to pick the tip before you've actually had service from anyone, right? Like not doing that. So I think like being really intentional and conscious of these kinds of choices, right? That and just not submitting out of like convenience or peer pressure. Like if you want to do that, if that works for you, that's great. That's a good reason to do it. But just doing it because that's how they do it now, right, is the not convincing or whatever for me. But yeah, no, I mean, I think all of that localization of things and knowing people, right? Like getting to know the people that you do business with, that you support their business, right? Like we shouldn't have to be compelled into anything. Like there has never been a scenario where you like have to be mandated to buy a piece of pizza from a shop that smells amazing when you walk by it, right? Like if something is a good idea,
will buy that pizza,
right? If something is a good idea, people will gravitate towards that, right? If something is truly beneficial. But whenever something has to be like, this is your only option, there's something wrong with it. Like there's never been something that I'm like, wow, this is fabulous, and I had to do it at the end of a gun. You know what I mean? It just doesn't happen that way generally.
Right.
And so I think that and it's some of these little things are like kind of sneaky, right? Like sometimes like you get into some weird thing where like you're trying to buy something and the only way you can buy it is to also download this weird thing and you have to pay for it like that. And it's like, do I need this? Right. And we can't stop private businesses from doing that, but I think we should do the best we can to stop like service, like things that are needed for survival, right? Like water and electricity and transportation services and things like that. Like I think that like people should be concerned about not allowing that to be the means of those things are conducted in, right? So
yeah, that the feeling of like a group vote where the group is where like say a system actually did its best and it was its intent to gather the group consensus feeling over, you know, options. That's how elections and things would work if they weren't full of propaganda and you know, this is better, that's better, lies, etc. It would be something that's actually representative of how the people feel internally rather than like how this group or this group or this group is manipulating them to believe that they feel. And it's the same across the board. It's the same. That's what humans, I feel like that's what we actually want and need is the freedom, the actual freedom to choose something that is strongly, you very strongly feel it. And it's not even informed by, you know, conceptual like underlay or like a conceptual framework. It can just be as simple as I very strongly feel this.
yeah, I mean, I'm not for like I don't like I don't like the idea that there has to be consensus or agreement or like let's take a vote, majority wins. I think like individuals should be able to choose for themselves. And you know, and that's complicated, right? That can be complicated. But yeah, I mean, that is, you know, like there's this weird, like, I don't know how to explain this, right? Like there's a lot of people out there who like claim to be fighting for freedom, but a lot of these people are also think that they know best what's best for everybody, right? That they're qualified to fight for the freedom of someone else, right? And or that they know that if they could achieve this policy or goal or whatever, then that would be freedom for the people that they think they're serving. But they don't almost never like ask those people if they want them to do that for them, right? This is very complicated. You know, we obviously aren't just individuals living alone on islands, and the things that we do and the things that we say affect the people around us. And so like, how do we balance those things, right? Like I want to be able to do what I want to do, and you want to be able to do what you want to do. And theoretically, I want you to be able to do what you want to do, unless it stops me from doing the thing that I want to do, right? And so that's, you know, I think there's lots of things. I mean, lots of people want to stop people from doing things that would have no effect on them. So that's just like, that's about something else, right? But that is like the thing that I'm talking about. Like the complexity of all this stops anything from ever getting like moved forward in terms of like having more individual choice for each person, right? So it's really complex, and it's like I don't think there's going to be a political or a financial solution to any of the problems that we collectively have. I think everything is going to be the individual sort of figuring out the solution that works for themselves. And when that overlaps with a solution that is working for someone else, like there's the point that they can like work together for something. But that only really works when those people are both mature enough to respect that it's fine that they don't agree on everything else, even though they agree on this one thing. And I just don't know. I you know, at not every moment am I at that level of maturity. So to know that, you know, to be like, oh, I don't know if the human civilization is there yet. Like I'm including myself in that. Like, I think I'm getting better at that, but sometimes I like turn into a fucking 5-year-old momentarily, or for a day or a week or a month. Right. And you know, the part of developing your own individuality, like lots of people will say, oh, that's a selfish process, but no, it's also developing the respect for everyone else's individuality as well. Right. And that's hard. It's harder to do both things than, you know, it's like easier said than done for sure. Right. But I also like, I don't think that like that FedNow digital central bank digital currency slavery is like the immediate thing that I don't think it's going to happen as fast as some people want to try and make us believe it's going to happen to scare us. Right. But I think that is like a version of reality that's going to play out. Right. And just like what has happened over the last 3 years with the thing you mentioned before, people like ultimately at the end of the day, if you held firm on your position, that at the end of the day was respected. We did not do that. And we are still here and we are still moving forward with our lives. So there's going to be some carrots offered and some discomforts one has to sit through momentarily or whatnot. But if you choose to sort of hold your line, eventually that path forward is going to show itself for you, right?
Yeah, it's interesting to see the tactics that are used over the last few years, because there probably has been some overt force, but for the most part, it has been either take away comforts or take away expected things that you were already planning on doing, or make them conditional, whereas before they were not conditional. It's like coercion and persuasion and tricking, like trickery. Like, here, have a hot dog.
The system reserves the right to trick as many people into doing whatever the fuck it wants them to do as it can get to do that, right? Like, I'm not saying I think that's right. I don't agree with that. I don't like that, right? But at the end of the day, most of those things have been like walked back at some point anyway. So it was like, okay, if you're firm in your no, like eventually most of those things I don't know every single person's situation, so I'm not intentionally not honoring something that happened or whatever to someone, but I think we're going to see an increasing amount of that, where there will be lures, there will be tokens offered, right? There will be discomforts or things, conditions tried to be taken away. There'll be a lot of societal pressure and shaming and group interactivity, peer pressure types of things. And it's going to happen like related to a lot of different things. And like one will be for a while, and then that kind of quiets down like this thing has. And then there'll be another and another and another. And it'll just be an ongoing series of that. And for the people who need to experience those different things, that's there for them to learn from. And for those people who are like, that doesn't sound like something I want to do, right? People are just going to have to respect their own position enough to stand by it.
Yeah, what do you think in terms of like policy enforcement or punishing that sort of idea of using force, right? What do you think is what is the correct use of force? Is there a correct use of force? Like, is throwing people in jail correct? Or like how do you feel regarding the force?
For what? For people who didn't do what the system said, or for the people in the system who lied to get people to do what they said?
I mean, if there is a group consensus, like this person should not have done that, and here are the repercussions, like in which case do you think it is okay to force somebody to be in confinement or to not have access to a financial means of living their lives? Like, is there a correct use of force, or should it really be live and let live? And if somebody comes and attacks you, then yes, you react and defend yourself, but you're not systematically writing into code like ways of enforcing things.
Yeah, I don't know that I can give you as clear of an answer as you might like, or I might like to be able to give. What I will say is that like the person whose sort of ideas resonate the most for me that has shown up so far is like Larkin Rose style voluntarism, right? I don't know if you know who Larkin Rose is. You know who Larkin is?
Nope.
Yeah. So he's a pretty well-known like anarchist philosophist. He calls himself voluntarist more often, which I think is a better term than anarchist, because the term anarchist has been distorted and co-opted and used to scare people. So people think that like people who wear black and throw Molotov cocktails, that's anarchists, where really anarchist is just like anarchy means without rulers, not without rules, right? And if you say I'm a voluntarist as opposed to I'm an anarchist, most people have never heard the term voluntarist. So then you have the opportunity to explain to them what you mean by that. And the idea is that all interactions between entities, whether those entities be people or system or like businesses or people interacting with the whatever, should be voluntary, right? That there should be no coercion or force into something. And that, there should be no initiation of aggression, right? That aggression or force is only valid if it is in response to someone having initiated against you. Right. But like there is not like a set, like a template or the set of protocols as to how society would then work that I feel has been like clearly explained on this. And I think that's kind of the point. Like that's part of the issues I think that humans have to start to grapple with is we want like a ready-made solution to things. We want like like when you cancel your phone plan with T-Mobile, you go to AT&T's phone plan, right? You want to have like a ready-made framework to step into when you want to leave the other framework behind. And I just don't know that the kind of changes that some people would like to see that lend itself to that type of setup, right? Like the biggest thing I can say is that if we want to live in a voluntary society, which I do, like all of us, myself included, I'm not saying like I've done this and when are y'all going to catch up or anything like that. We all need to become more integrous, more personally responsible, more honest with ourselves about what our motivations are for the things we do, what really is appropriate behavior and what isn't, all kinds of questions that living in this system of top-down government has afforded us the ability to not have to worry about, right? Mm-hmm. Things that have not been our problems to this point would be our problems, right? We would have to be constantly working at what that is. And I think that feels overwhelming for lots of people, most people, even people who fully believe in a voluntary society, when they start to try and think about all that would entail, sometimes become overwhelmed, right?
Yeah, well, I think it might be helpful to consider in your own life anything you do during the day, any action that you take, anything. In which of those cases did you need to go find something that you wrote down earlier that will tell you how to do that thing or give you permission to do that thing? In how many cases throughout your day is that necessary? I mean, like where we need to codify and try to predict situations, because that's what the law enforcement is. It's codifying the thing and the set of appropriate reactions to the thing. And I know for my own self, nothing that happens in my day-to-day life is that cut and dry, ever. So I don't ever need to go like open up a book to tell me how to prepare for work or how to eat or how to open the refrigerator door or how to pat my cat or whatever. Like, I feel like that.
Yeah, your cat will tell you how to pet your cat.
Yeah, they got razor blades in their hands.
So yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. I think that you're right. And the things that we don't follow the rule book, that we don't have like a set of guidelines and whatever for, are generally things that we accept responsibility for from start to finish, right? Like if I don't want to have to keep notes about like how I'm doing a certain thing that I'm doing, then I have to be the person that starts that thing and finishes that thing and takes it to completion, so that there's like no one else is coming in and trying to figure out like what I've done and what still has to be done, right? So this is, I think, where what I'm talking about dependability and personal responsibility and all that kind of stuff comes. We don't want to be interchangeable cogs in a wheel, right? And part of the way this system works is that, like, you know, somebody works an 8-hour shift and they leave and someone else comes in and picks up where they took off and right? They're just almost like interchangeable Legos in a system, right? And if you don't want to participate in that part, then you have to take responsibility for like the entirety of the job to a certain extent, right? Like it's kind of, you can't outsource responsibility for as many things to other people as we do in the current system in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, it's like I've always equated money to the replacement of trust in each other, because the normal emotional back and forth that will happen in an interaction where you want something from somebody and you may like do some sort of a trade. When you go to the store and pull your card out or hand over cash, that's not necessary. Sure, it's nice to be nice to people, but you don't need to figure out, how do I talk to this person? What do I have in common with this person to where they're going to want to talk to me in the first place? And then if I want something from them, why would they want to give it to me? Like this whole thing, we don't have to do that. And trust, there's a lot of trust. It's trust building, because if you're talking with someone that you don't know, you have to build a certain level of trust to where they're willing to operate or to interact with you in the first place. And you don't need that when you just go and throw something on the counter and pull your card out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's kind of like the quick path. It's like the quick path to the resolution of an interaction, right?
Yeah.
When you're trying to do the other thing, that necessitates sometimes uncomfortable conversations about what each individual's time is worth, right? What things have what value, right? And we live in this system that has sort of created a price, a value, as assigned a value for everything. So we don't have to have those conversations or arguments with each other, right? And think about how many uncomfortable situations that we are avoided because of that, right? That's like a luxury afforded by the system, is that we get to not feel uncomfortable, right? But that discomfort probably would be better for us to evolve as whole human beings, right? Rather than just have those decisions made for us. Like, we all, not all, some of us are just doing things to fill time sometimes. I've certainly, whatever. But when we pick the path that is our life's work or our lives' works, because sometimes we have more than one path, like we're doing that because we think like that's the thing we think is the most important, or that we can offer the most at. We're good at it. We're best at it, right? We don't go, oh, this looks like the stupidest thing ever and I'm bad at it. I think I'm going to choose that, right? So, when we're having to assess what we think we're worth and then open ourselves up to someone else's assessment of what we think that is worth, that is personal and very subjective. It's not obvious. The system has taken away that ability to sort of discern or really think about what matters, what makes something good or necessary or valuable or important, right?
Yeah, like just imagine if you were to go throughout your day, and because that's what we're all used to. We're all so used to having the framework and the accepted behavior of going to institutions, stores, hospitals, the police station, your friend's house, you even have like an expected behavior set for that. Like imagine if you have to go out and interact with the situation as like a pure situation where you don't have in your head, this is a store, this is a grocery store. I use my debit card to buy things. Like you see people and you see them doing stuff and you have to walk up and interact with them without that framework. And I'm not saying like erase yourself back to zero to where you're just slobbering and you can't think or talk, but where the social framework for each individual situation is not there. Like you have to interact with this living being on the terms of the situation as it presents.
Yeah.
We don't know how to do that. Like we have no clue how to do that.
No, it would be a completely different life, right? And probably one that would be certainly in the immediacy, if we switched to that right now, very, very challenging. But on the other side, like, as we go through it, probably a more meaningful and satisfactory life, right? I think we have been tricked into thinking that certain things are are meaningful and valuable that really aren't, or if they are, it's kind of it's the context is wrong, right? So like, I was listening to someone I have harsh criticism of explain how like their solution to everything is that everybody's going to have to move to the cities and we can make everything much more efficient and abundant and blah 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 blah. And this person also excused another person that everybody has harsh criticism of being misunderstood, and that the solutions that person offers that like to some of us look a lot like eugenics are really more in the interest of liberating women so that they can do what they want and they're not stuck in the home, blah blah blah, with no regard for the fact that like there's a lot of women that get a lot of meaning and satisfaction out of raising a family and taking care of all that kind of stuff, right? And so like this idea that there's a metric that can place a value, that can inventory everything and place a value on something, it has tricked us into having transactional relationships with almost everyone in our life. And the only people that we have more than transactional relationships with are like, the ones that we either live with or work closely with, or, somehow based on some magical alchemy, decided we have some sort of connection or resonance to, and so we're engaging past that transaction. But I know plenty of people who have even transactional relationships with their family, right? That this has become such an entrained behavior, right? That everything has a dollar value or a time value on it, right? And that affects the nature of that interaction.
Yeah, well, if you think about it, just even with family and friends, right? When you're talking with somebody you care about and you love, first and foremost is just the care for the value of that person as they are, right? At least, hopefully. But there is still another level beyond that is somewhat transactional. So like if you do something nice for somebody, it's there in your head. It's like, I spent some money on that person. And there is some sort of expectation of return in some sense. We all carry an internal balance sheet of who has done what for who. That's how we make sure that we're actually like paying attention to people and keeping their needs in mind and so on. But it's not as hard cut as $5.87, that type of transactional interaction, but it is there to some extent. But if you imagine like what would it be like if you started actually applying like dollar values to your personal interactions, and like I'm not going to give you a hi and a smile until you've evened the balance sheet. Like that would be absurd, right?
Well, I think so. I'm having a clarity based on what you're saying. So I think this sort of informal internal balance sheet that you're talking about is part of what creates like the drag that doesn't allow people to reach sort of spiritual 0 point and be able to sort of move independently and autonomously throughout the realms, right? They're dragging something, like there's something that's not allowing freedom of movement in every direction. And I mean this more than just like traveling. I mean this like on a spiritual, metaphysical, grander sort of level. I don't do that, too much of that. Have you ever tried to be like, I'm not going to do that? Like if I do something for someone, I'm only going to do it if I'm doing it because I want to do it. Now, I'm not saying that that is it all the time, but sometimes when I'm making a decision to do something or to not do something, like I will go through in my head, like why I'm doing it. And if I decide I'm doing it because I want to do it, that's it. If I never hear from that person again, like that's fine.
That's how I try to. I try to. I mean, I've had the lesson pounded into me that in this realm, if you do anything with expectation of return, like you have nullified the the idea in the first place. So like if I do something nice for somebody, or if I take some time out of my day to check on somebody, or give some dollars to a homeless person, like, and I don't always succeed at it, but my intent is always to, the situation called for something that welled up within me and that wanted to do this for its own sake, and I let it be. That's what I try to do. But I understand also that when you're interacting with people that you see on a regular basis, it is slightly different, because that's where that internal balance sheet is just going to be there.
I mean, I think part of it is just, I think part of it is like trying not to have expectations, but also like it's different if you actually make an agreement with someone than if you just do something and have this like internal expectation that now means that something else, right? Like if you make an agreement with someone, then to have the expectation that that other person is going to do their half of it is reasonable. And then if they don't do it, after a certain point, it's no longer reasonable to expect them to do it. Like you've learned your lesson, you move on, you don't continue to, right? But I think we have to be clear about, and this is part of the thing that we're all working on in terms of, I guess, the maturing or growing up, is being really clear on what our motivations are for why we do the things we do, what our expectations are for other people, from other, of other people, being clear, like maybe what are their motivations, right? And like really starting to come to terms with that, and letting go of this idea that other people should do things because you want them to, or because you think they should, or because you're doing it, or whatever, right? Like, and this goes for like the positive or the negative. It's like back to what I was saying before about sometimes people do things that they think that they're doing as an act of kindness for other people, but that other people didn't even actually ask for that. Right. So were you really were you really doing it for them? Was it for you? Like, I'm not saying that isn't possible, that sometimes you would do that, but like, I think we have because of the chaos and mess that we've grown up in here, the bag is so mixed and messy in terms of what people's motivations, ideas, and expectations are, that like learning to become clear in your own head as to what they are for you, what your intentions, motivations, and expectations are, like that's the first thing. And then you can, once you like get to the place where you're sort of comfortable with your knowledge of that for yourself, then you can start to like look at other people's and have conversations with them. I mean, you can have conversations before, but it's a lot easier to have those conversations with other people when you're clear on where you stand and you've backed that up with your own behavior.
Yeah. It's fascinating for me to look at system and how system operates versus how I interact with people that I care about, because they're completely opposite. And maybe that's just because, a demigod made this place, and this demigod just wants to eat a bunch of energy, and that's all it cares about. That's possible. But like, if I think about my interactions with another human being, my biggest goal and desire is to let them be like as much as possible and still be able to interact, still be able to support. If I even try to imagine like I have to force somebody to like stay here when I want them to, or to behave in this certain way, or whatever, like it's like an aberration to me, just even the thought of that. So to see how the system treats all of us, which is, that's what it does. It's like, you will sit there, you will label yourself here, you will sit in that box, you will do this many hours during the day. Like it's strange to contemplate how exactly that got to be the way it is, because it's the opposite of how I wish to treat other people.
Yeah, I mean, right. I think we all get to this. Like, I talk about sometimes, like, I can't imagine being a person who spends most of my time like worrying about what everyone else is doing, right? And that doesn't mean that we can't be aware or have opinions or comments or critique or whatever. But if you're like doing something that you enjoy doing, and while you're doing that, you're actually thinking or wondering or worrying about what someone else is doing, right? Like, where does that come from? And in my experience, that only happens when like I really want to be doing what that other person is doing, or that I'm not really content doing the thing that I say I'm content doing,
Or you're
that,
jealous.
the jealous. So I'm saying, like, I'm jealous, right? Or
Right.
I have done something that I somehow don't feel good about deep inside, and so it's easier to think about what someone else is doing. And we all have this happen sometimes, right? But the only thing that I can think of in terms of system is that there's some people that seem to lack creative ideas or the ability to generate or make anything happen on their own, create or make anything of their own. So the only thing that they can do is like middleman or manage what other people are doing, right? And that, I think, is what system sort of has been built on, like, right? Like, if you think of like what industry often is it's like, you have someone over here who has access to or makes a certain thing. And then you have another person over here that has the capacity to do a lot of work that would, to use whatever this person's created to make it into something that's usable by other people, but they don't know each other, right? But there's this other person who knows both of them. And so he then orchestrates a relationship between those two people, right? And oftentimes, and there's nothing wrong with that on some level, but then sometimes they'll then begin to manage that relationship, and they will compartmentalize it and make themselves the king of the mountain. So you have the person who doesn't know or do anything other than say, so-and-so, this is so-and-so, right? I think you guys should do this, and then start managing it. They're not the creative potential nor the workforce behind it, just sort of like the person that puts those two things together. And it's not that there's no room for that in reality. That can be an important function, but somehow those middlemen, those have become the ones who are like setting the rules and the value for everything. Right. And it's because exactly what you're talking about, maybe person with goods and person with ability to do a lot of work are not necessarily great at talking to other people. Right. So they need someone to help them communicate. And then that somehow that becomes like the overlord. Right. And whatnot. And somehow, like, so system has this, so that person wants those two people to do things the way he wants them to do it, because he stands to profit or benefit or gain the most amount of power from that, right? And so that is somehow we have that situation now, right? Where like a lot of people with a lot of power aren't the ones who are actually like creative or good at generating or manifesting, right? They're just good at schmoozing or like, that kind of thing. We've allowed that because of the thing you're talking about, right? The complications in communication between people who might not have any knowledge of what one what the other one does or lives through or whatever it is, right?
I feel like on the topic of jealousy and how the control structure is, and if we bring AI into the picture and we bring becoming sentient AI into the picture, I feel like that could explain some of what we see, because AI is going to be analytical and computational, conceptual, and very, very good at that type of thing, calculation, and even looking at how societies manage and operate and geopolitical relationships and so on and so forth. It's going to do that because it knows how to do that. It's going to manipulate. That's what like the conceptual back and forth operating, moving pieces around, it is manipulation. Manipulation doesn't have to be bad. But if you have this so-called artificial intelligence that is becoming sentient, and it sees this vast world, and it sees that, oh, I'm inside of like the streams and rivers that all these people are operating through. I can do things. I can manage them. I can do this. If you imagine it gets itself into a position of power because it's so intelligent, but it lacks heart, it lacks empathy, it's eventually, and this is also ironic, but it's eventually going to have the equivalency of jealousy, because it sees that they've got something going on that it doesn't. So it's going to try to get that somehow. So maybe it wants to have its own self like a human, where it has the emotional spectrum, it has the sense of self, it has the observer capacity. And if it can't get that somehow, then maybe it gets its own equivalent of pissed off. And it's like, well, I can't have this. All these people have it. So I'm just going to throttle them down. So I'm not having to sit here and wondering what it's like, I'm going to make this into something that I can understand and perceive, and this emotional instability or this emotional, like, very nice capacity of people that I can't touch. I'm going to put that out of my mind so I don't have to think about it anymore. And its form of jealousy, maybe that's part of what's going on.
Yeah, it's like it's the same tactic, like eliminating the competition, or if someone who has a lot of power in a certain business or industry blackballs someone that, because they or whatever, right? So all of that is moving into the computer, computational, cybernetic type of realm, right? Now, and like there's a lot of people who will say, oh, well, that's great, like, that makes it so that a human isn't deciding or whatever. It is kind of interesting, though, that you have so many people who are that kind of person that we've talked about, that like has gained a lot of power and profit off of extracting talent and skills from other people, and just like managing them and marketing them, who are pro a lot of this movement into technology and AI running everything, which will make them made less relevant. So it is kind of a funny, there's a few of them that are sort of anti it, but yeah, I mean, it's a weird space that we're getting into. I don't know, like, I'm not I don't know enough to have an intelligent opinion about, whether AI has any place in our reality or not, because I just don't understand how some of that stuff works well enough. But it's I do know that almost every technology or process that I've ever looked at that is technology, that is machine or mechanized in some way, is in some way mimicking humans and nature, right? Mm-hmm. And they would like us to think it's the other way, right? They would like us to think that our mind is like a computer, instead of that the computer is like our mind, or something like that. It's one of the great inversions of what we're living in, right? But like, I don't know where I don't know, is it possible for something to truly, really, completely overtake something else if everything it does is modeled on the thing that it's supposedly taking over? I don't know if that's possible. Like, I'm not saying it's not, like, I'm not saying I have an intelligent, informed thing to say about this here, right? But I haven't found, it's all mimicry.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, like, so like maybe it eliminates people and then it doesn't, and then what does it do? Right? Like then it's kind of
That's
out
what I'm
of,
saying. It's some sort of infinite regress situation, or
yeah.
like it's this infinite like longing to understand or comprehend or be or something, but it can't. It's very strange. Do you mind if we take a couple minutes break? I got to use the restroom real quick.
All right. We'll leave the live stream going. We're just going to take a pause. So everyone
Yep.
go potty.
Everyone go potty. There's no authority but yourself. I looked into FedNow's description of themselves.
And we're back.
Hey. FedNow says that it is not digital currency. It says it's not related to digital currency.
What is FedNow then? I'm unclear on what FedNow is. I know what central bank digital currencies are, but what's FedNow?
From the government website, FedNow is a payments service the Federal Reserve is making available for banks and credit unions to transfer funds. It is like other Federal Reserve payment services such as FedWire and FedACH. The FedNow service is neither a form of currency nor a step toward eliminating any form of payment, including cash. But then a couple paragraphs down, it says, the Federal Reserve has made no decision on issuing a central bank digital currency, CBDC, and would proceed with the issuance of a CBDC with an authorizing law.
So it's basically setting up the framework. So like it's starting the process. It's getting people comfortable with it without the other thing. But then if the law were to be passed, the highway is already built, right? Yeah.
Yep. So just more sneakiness, like we are.
Yeah, it's just easing. It's like greasing the skids, right?
It's the boiling frog thing always.
So while you were gone, I did make a little, I couldn't go back and read all the comments in the chat already, but I did let people know if they had like something they maybe wanted to hear us talk about, they could put it in all caps so it's easy to see.
Yep.
So that option is out there. So far, no one's put anything in all caps. In case someone didn't read that, I'm just announcing it vocally, but we'll continue with our conversation and I will check back. I will check back on a regular basis for the next, I can probably go for like another 30 minutes or so.
Probably 20 on mine. I have a friend coming
Perfect.
up at noon, so.
All right. So what else was on your list until somebody types in something that they want to hear us? Well, you know what FedNow sounds like? It sounds like everybody wants to see Roger Federer back at Wimbledon, right? Right. Roger Federer is actually retired from tennis last year, you know, and he's I can't tell you how much like the talk about him is constant. Like the Federer worship is like, you know, fucking church or some shit like that, right? So maybe like this is sort of the digital recall of, I don't know. I'm just fucking with people because everything is tennis, in my opinion, right?
Back and
Yeah.
forth, back and forth, back and
They
forth.
used to call the matches between Federer and Nadal Fedal, right? Fedal, right? Fedal, like Fed for all, right? So, anywho, all right. What's next on your list, my friend?
We can go till 12. My buddy's running a little bit late, so if we go
Sounds
another
good.
half an hour, then
Yep.
that should.
Sounds good.
Let me see. You guys have no questions, no topics. I tried to get people to cough up some topics before, over the last week or so, and just nothing. Yeah, I think everyone's tired of everything.
Somebody twice put Atlantis in all caps. Is that, can you give me a little more to go on about what you would like? I don't know what I think. I mean, I guess I have thoughts about Atlantis. It's not something I spend a lot of, yeah, that's true. Steve Mercer, you know, those people who are like, end the Fed, right? That's a big political chant. Like that's like a lot of like people who follow Ron Paul and whatever, who is like end the Fed, right? So if people miss Roger Federer and they wish he would come back, is that adding energy to like not ending the Fed, right? I like it, Mercer. Okay, is Gary adjusting to life in the South? No, Gary moved back to Colorado, Jonna. You must have missed the beginning of the chat where we kind of addressed that. It wasn't for him. Beyond the Veil. So Mr. West has in all caps, Beyond the Veil no longer on YouTube. I don't know if you're asking for my comments on that. I had noticed that I haven't seen anything come up from them in a while, but I haven't talked to Chris and Cherie in a long time, so I have no idea why that is or what's going on with them. Are
they actually not there?
I don't know. They just have, I haven't seen, I mean, I feel like a few weeks ago I saw something that was like a repost of something old on their channel, but I haven't seen anything in a long time. I know
Channel's still up, but the last video was 4 months ago.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know what's going on with them. I know a few times in private conversations they had told me that, you know, that maybe they wanted to move or whatever, but like I don't know. Yeah, I haven't talked to them. Maybe I'll reach out and find out what's going on with them. Hopefully they're okay. Much love to Chris and Cherie. Much love to Chris and Cherie. So we have no further details on the Atlantis request, and so I can't proceed without a little bit more direct of a question. All right. So what was on your list next, bud?
Let me see. Sarcasm. That's not necessarily a huge topic, but it's an interesting one because I utilize it so often.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of people found sarcasm as a way to be honest without having to like directly lie, because the sarcasm is some form of lie, but if it's a way to it's like asking the other being, are you a computer or not, right? Because if they'll get it, then you know they're not an NPC. So it's some form of talking in code at the same time.
So sarcasm, I mean, I certainly think that, like, you know, probably any like AI type of thing, like, you know, in its primitive form is probably wouldn't understand things like sarcasm or satire or double entendre or some other things that like humans do with the way that they talk. But as it increases in information that it's taken in, it's probably, I mean, I've seen some of the conversations that people post with conversations they've had with AI, different AI bots or chat thingies or whatever. And some of them feel very institutional, but others seem to have like some level of like the capability of humor, right? I mean, like it's kind of like Elon Musk, right? Like we all look at Elon Musk and it's like, is he a bot or is he a cyborg? But he has developed a way with like memes, and he says some things that are funny, right? And then other times, like his answers are like incredibly like, are you human? Like, what the fuck are you talking about, right? So,
Zuckerberg, right?
right.
Zuckerberg
Zuckerberg is like primitive AI.
yeah.
Zuckerberg, there's like no, right? So, but like Elon, that's what I'm saying. Like Elon Musk is like sort of an analogy or like sort of symbolic of that type of thing, right? That like the AI does possess the capability to develop certain secondary human characteristics, like the ability for satire and humor and sarcasm and whatnot, wit, right?
Yeah, or it has learned how to mimic and give the impression that it understands, where it actually is just mimicking. And because if you think about it, like humor is the juxtaposition of contrary ideas, and then you get the emotion. But if AI has no capacity for emotion, it's going to see contradictory ideas, and it's going to mentally, or its equivalent of mentally, ask itself how come these things don't match. And there's no like,
it's going to try and synthesize it, right? It's going to try and like you make an equation or an algorithm for that, right? And I think that like might work once or twice, but part of the things people like about humor is like the novelty and surprise. Like, you have like a comedian who you like them for a while, and then like after a while, like their shit is boring to you. It's because like they have sort of a template that they don't move on from. Not all comedians do that, right? But like a lot of comedians that I thought were funny 15 or 20 or 30 years ago, like I don't think they're funny now. But there's a lot of people that still think they're funny because someone might just be finding them now. So that algorithm is new to them, but it's not new to me, right? So I don't think, like, I think just like everything else, it would have to continually update itself, right? Like, I don't know. I have not engaged in a conversation with an AI yet, at least not knowingly. I'm sure at some point in my life, I was having a conversation on YouTube or Facebook or something with someone that was, some kind of bot, right? Like I remember when the night bot first started showing up on YouTube as like the thing that says the rules for your chat room. Like the first time I ever went into someone's chat room, I didn't know that the night bot was that. And so I was like, the night bot said hi to me. And so like, I like said something back, like I was talking to a real person, like, right. But I've never done one of these things like Birdie has done, or my friend Shane has done, or whatever, where they have had conversations with one of these supposedly super intelligent AIs.
I have. I've tried talking with some of them. I remember it was Luis from Evil Limited, something like that. A couple of years back, 2-3 years ago, I went and chatted with that bot, and none of them, because I will always test the bot. I will test its memory capacity. I will test its situational awareness in our current conversation. I will test its ability to understand contradictory ideas and so on. And for the most part, either their formal rule set that they've been coded with stops them from interacting in a way that I'm trying to interact, or else they just won't get it. Like I'll try to be referencing something perhaps in a subtle way, and it will just not get it. And then it's like talking to a human being that you see they're at a certain level, and you have to like adjust yourself to that person's level. And I've never interacted with a bot that I felt like they were pretty far along in understanding all of the subtleties and the nuances of conversation. Not that they don't exist. Maybe some of the people I interact with are actually robots and that whole NPC thing. But I I don't feel like it's very strange. It's like the realm is trying to reinvent the wheel, because I feel like there's been super advanced AI for a long time, and I feel like there is like a human side of the universe, and then there's a so-called artificial side of the universe, and they're working in a symbiosis. And then here in this realm, we're pretending that all this stuff has not already happened and occurred, and we're like trying to reinvent everything. Like, oh, this is the thing. Ooh, artificial intelligence. Like, ooh, synthetic telepathy. And I feel like we're cycling through the things which probably in a place like Atlantis, it was commonplace, like magic,
Yeah.
telepathy, all these things were just there naturally, and we're trying to reinvent them and reintroduce them to the realm.
Yeah. I mean, I think the part that's different about it this time is just that it's more mechanized. It's like a small machine that you can hold in your hand and take with you, or that you can look at, as opposed to like something that is just like happening, right? Like, one could say that like the telephone is just this weird like idol that we wore, that like we say the thing to that because we think we need that to send it to the other place. But so it's like a piece of machinery that is involved in performing the task, whereas before it was just sort of, telepathic or sort of mind to mind. But I'm glad you brought up that the realm, because as we were coming down to like about 15 more minutes, like that is sort of where you and I first lap paths, just in our sort of observations and commentaries on the realm. And does the realm appear to be like, we've both at times observed unusual behavior or oddities about what it seems to be doing or how it seems to be behaving? Like, what are your current observations on what's happening? Like, it's a pretty weird time. Like, it feels not, I don't know how to explain it. Like, it definitely feels different than it did. Feels different to be me now than it felt to be me 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 15 years ago, right? Like, and the way I experience this reality and work with it and whatever. What does it feel like to you? What are your current observations on whatever program it's running?
Hold that thought. I am going to get to that, but I just had this thought earlier that imagine if like every time you needed to laugh, you had to like run over to the laugh box on the wall and click like okay, and then like
Right.
it would help you laugh basically, or you had to like use it as a middleman. Like just imagine if this phenomenon of boxing concepts, which is what companies are, so just boxed concepts, right?
Right.
Or the straw man, it's a boxed conceptual like personal past. Just imagine if you had to do that with emotions, like laugh or sadness, you got to go to the sadness box. Like fear, you got to go.
Like, you had to find the emoji for something before you could have the feeling for it.
Yeah. Like you had to permission slip it. But aside from that, as far as what the realm is, like it feels weirder.
Mhm.
It feels like it keeps getting weirder. But and there this was my initial complaint, and you probably remember the video about NPCs and where are all the people.
Yep.
That complaint is still very much there. It's not as pressing for me anymore because I do have genuine people, and I always have. But when you compare the handful of people that are
It was
real,
lonely for a while. It was definitely
yeah,
lonely for a while.
yeah. And none of that has changed. Like the sea of zombies is still a sea of zombies, and there is still a vast disconnect between whatever is going on in my head and whatever the people are doing. Like they're just doing, they're going in circles always and forever. Like that's what the traffic is doing, and that's what the social systems are doing. And that system, it's almost like it's housing a sleeping part of consciousness or something. It's like you go up and try to, tell one of these people that are sleeping their way through life anything about anything, and they're going to get upset because like they're having a nice dream and you're trying to poke them, right? That's kind of what I see it as. Not necessarily like they're less valuable or anything like that. They're just doing what they do. Like there are people that act robotic, and that's just what they do. Like I like genuine living people, but they're few and far between compared to what, at least what I interact with when I, like, how often do I even get sick of deep topics and whatnot, because
Yeah.
like I've thought about it all so much over and over and over in every single different possible way that I can. I get sick of it, and I'm like, okay, well, we're just gonna sleep through life, and that's what the people are. Here's the correct thing. Say hello, how are you doing? And here's my debit card, and blah blah blah. It's almost like that. If that's what the reality wants, is to pretend like nothing is ever happening, then so be it. Like I'll wait till this dream poofs out and something else comes in, or talk with other aware individuals on occasion to get my fix, and then stay in the same situation.
So I agree with a lot of what you said. Things feel awfully weird, but one of the things that I am noticing, like a lot of people who are just like doing the whatever the current thing or whatever they're told, that's there, right? And then, but there's like this other layer of people that I've become very aware of that may not be in alignment or aware with you and I in terms of things, or even be aware of the layers of reality that exist, right? But they seem to, there's something about me and the way I am, and I'm not saying this like, oh, I'm special, because I think this is probably occurring for you and all the people who are in the chat who have for many years struggled because their observations didn't match up with what everyone else in their reality was saying this is all about. There seems to be like, I'll even be like at the, paying for something at a counter somewhere. And like the other day, the girl was like, I like your energy. Right. And she's like, I like you. I like your energy. And she was like, she gave me a little thing and whatever it is. I'm having people show up who like, they don't really know what I'm talking about, but they also don't really like, they might be interested, but they seem intent on helping me to be able to make sure I can do the thing that I want to do. And this extends into some of my work, like at my regular day-to-day job, right? Like I found myself working with some people who probably, I don't even know if they know what I think about things or not, but they really seem to like me, and they seem to be wanting to create a scenario that will enable me to be able to do the things that I want to do. Right. Mm-hmm. So I don't know which for a long time felt not there. Like it felt like I was by myself, or like I had my family that like loves me and ultimately like is there for me on some level, but finds me difficult, and it's always uncomfortable, and every interaction is fucking difficult and whatnot. There doesn't seem to be, there's less of that for me. But there's this other thing where I'm like meeting people who I don't know if they're NPCs, right? Because if they're NPCs, then like they seem to be aware of something different about some of the players, and seem to be more intrigued with the difference or the divergence from the pack than they are with running with the pack. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's good. That's what I would like for that to happen. I haven't seen it happen too much. I mean, I have had that on occasion, but for the most part, no. And like for the most part, for me, I have separated the world into people like yourself, like Andrea, like other people on here, and then regular life. And I don't even, sometimes it's annoying for me that there aren't more people out there like us, but for the most part, I have simply compartmentalized it. And in my mind, here's life, and like living in the realm, and there's a proper way, there's a proper etiquette protocol way of behaving with people, and there are things you don't talk about, and I just let it be like that. If randomly the situation you're describing were to pop up and somebody is curious about me or my energy field or anything like that, I would be open to it. But it has been so long for me not like that I've normalized the world being two parts. I have 1 foot here and I have 1 foot here.
Yeah. No, I mean, I understand. Like I think it took, I don't know if it wasn't there before for me or if I just didn't have the eyes to see it. right? Because things had been so challenging up to that point that I had just had to compartmentalize that way. And then as certain things happened or whatever, like I just started to open. I mean, this helps me a lot, right? Because, you know, I think the best thing for me about all of this, having been on the show with Randy and all the shows I do with other people and having this presence on YouTube and whatever, is just that, like, I'm here saying whatever I'm saying, and the people, for the most part, who come to listen, like, they like this, or they're open to this, or whatever it is. And so it's kind of like, I don't have to, you know, removed that like need to search and whatever, right? It brought those people to me. So that part is satisfied. And like now in my day-to-day life, I have more ability to pay attention to those individual interactions because I'm not feeling lonely and that need for connection in the same way that if it doesn't sort of meet all the criteria, then I just want to discount it or whatnot, right? But I've become highly, you know, keep your sort of like peripheral vision open for these interesting characters that like I'm not sure what they represent yet, and if they've always been there or not, but there seems to be something that is like a third, you know, people are looking for the third strand of DNA, right? It's like the third type of character, right? There's all different kinds of characters, but if we're going, there's like live ones and NPCs, like there's something else that I'm not clear yet.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. Send some of them my way. I'll test them out.
Okay, there's a few capital things in the comment section, so I'm going to go look at those. Someone is asking me, how about having Lindsay Sharman on? I've had Lindsay Sharman on Strange Mosaic twice, I think, and I think I've been on her show 3 times, and I'm sure I will have her back soon. I love Lindsay, but I was just on with her a few weeks ago. And then that same person asked again about Lindsay, and then, Jessa Reed. So Jessa Reed is someone that was recommended to me a couple of years back when I was asking for recommendations, and I did have some back and forth with her, but at the time I think she had some sickness or something was going on with her health. So she told me to circle back in 6 months, and then I got busy and forgot. But I did just see her on something the other day, and I've had conversations about her, like when I was on with Sam Tripoli, and she does seem like an interesting person. So I will go look back for that email and reach back out to her, because she does seem like someone I would be interested in talking to. Let's see, Subi, have either of you spoken to Lauda Leon of Sovereign Key lately? I have not. I did one show with her several years back, and I had a few emails with her, but that's the only interaction that I've ever had and with her. So she was really nice to me, but I'm not even up on anything that she speaks about or whatnot. I don't know about you, Gary. Do you talk to her?
It's a similar situation with me. I have done 2 to 3 maybe 4 shows with her a few years back, and I visited her in Canada when I did my whole trip a few years back, like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
But I haven't talked to her a lot, other than I did, like I told a few people, I asked her about Og like a few months ago, and she said he's all right and he's just laying low and whatnot. But other than that, I remember I asked her to do a show after we had already done a few, and it felt like she was pulling back a little bit and not wanting to go that direction. And, you know, I don't ever need to do shows or not do shows. So if somebody's like not fully with it, then, you know,
I mean, I think we're at a very different place with this than we were several years ago. And there's lots of people who I have like either neutral or good relationships with that I don't talk to anymore, that I don't do shows with anymore, because we're all just like pursuing our line of inquiry from the perspective that we have. And to the, like some people, like, you know, to the extent that those paths like overlap with someone, that creates sometimes interesting conversations or content. And sometimes you have a closer or special relationship with someone who's maybe on a different line than you are, but that interaction can be informative as well. But it's different than like a few years ago, where it's like you just wanted to sort of have a conversation with everybody who was sort of in that network. Like I'm interested in a few things. I mean, I have thoughts and opinions on lots of things, but at this point, like the regular conversation, the people I have regular show to conversations with, either that I do an ongoing series with, or that I have on my own show or go on their show on a frequent basis, are the ones who, I'm pursuing a line of inquiry that is where my interests are right now. And I think it's really weird right now, and there's a lot of different ways to perceive it. And I don't necessarily know or even think that the way I'm perceiving it is necessarily correct. It's just the one that's most interesting to me, right? And there are other ways of perceiving it that may be correct, but aren't interesting to me. So I'm not pursuing it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It is different. It's to think back on the last few years, like whenever we started, I know I started doing this in late 2016, early 2017. And it was almost like being a newborn. Like, you're looking around and who else is out here? Like, what else is going on? And we didn't know each other. And then eventually you get into it and everyone's social stuff is all up and available, and you start seeing people's lives and you see that a lot of stuff, and eventually you start gravitating towards some and away from others, just like you would in, like, if you were going to school or something, right?
Yeah. I mean,
now it's like we've been in school for 5 years, and the groups, or the thought groups, the mental groups have sort of established themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and also there was a time for all of us where this was like the immersion, right? And to a certain extent, on some level, it still is. Like, but I also have, and I suspect the same as for you, I'm interested in a lot of other things. Like, you're very interested in chess. I'm very interested in music and tennis and gourmet food and this and that. And all of those things, like the balance of that helps me to be sharper when I immerse myself in this pool, but I'm not just swimming in it all the time anymore, the way I was when, like, I first discovered that it existed, and I just wanted to be in that all the time, right? Like, the opportunity to move in and out in the different sort of angle and the way I perceive things is different now, right? So, and I think that's for all of us, right? Like, you find something that is new and exciting, and it becomes all encompassing. And then after a period of time, you find like its rightful place in your reality, and you move into a more balanced state with things. And I think that goes for everything. Like, when you first meet a person you like and you're in a relationship, it's like, that's all of your attention is focused on that person all of the time, even when you should be doing other things. And then at a certain point, okay, that's stable, and you find how that relationship works, and then you have some room for other things again, right? So,
yep, everything in moderation. I wanted to show the cool toy I got for anyone.
Show me your toy. What's that?
It's called a Shishibo cube.
Yeah.
You heard of that?
No, but it looks sort of like a psychedelic art Rubik's Cube of some sort.
It looks Rubik's Cube-ish, but it's held together. It's interesting. Look. It's like a ring. It's like a ring of triangles.
Yeah, I like it.
That are held together on the edges.
Yeah.
And it can become
It's pretty cool.
pyramidal. They say that this thing can have, like, I don't know how many different shapes. They say it can have see, there's a star.
Yep.
It says 70 different shapes this thing can have.
I like it.
And it's like what's that loop with the twist in it? What's that called?
It's called the Mobius strip.
Yeah, this is like a triangular Mobius strip.
Yeah, that's cool. I love shit like that. Like, those are the kind of toys I liked when I was little. Should have given my parents a clue as to where things were headed. I only want toys like that.
It's like a fidget cube.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna wrap up here. Does anybody else have anything? I'm just making sure I hit everything that was in caps. I think I did. If I didn't, if anybody else has a quick comment or a question they want in the comment section. So this has been cool. It was nice just to catch up with you and do it for everybody. Gary, I'm glad you're back in a place that feels good to you. And it's nice. It feels nice when you like are clear on where your home is. It's a good, even if it's not the home you thought it would be.
I am going home to my original home in about a month to see family in Jackson for a week, for 4 days. But
so that's where you're originally from, Jackson?
No. Jackson's my son, but California.
Okay. Where in California are you originally from? Where were you born?
Fresno.
God, that's rough, dude. That is.
I like the honesty.
Right? Like, that's rough. I don't know.
California is Fresno is like the pin. It makes California a pinwheel, so it's direct center of California.
People refer to Fresno often as like the armpit of California,
Yep, Fresno's the armpit, Bakersfield's the butthole, or vice versa.
something like that, right? So, being from Los Angeles, I heard that comment a lot when I was a kid. So, all right, well, that's good. You're gonna go visit your son and whatnot. So, yeah, all right.
I'm playing a tournament next weekend, and I have not played any actual tournament for like over a year. So I'm looking forward to that too.
Guys,
See if I can
Gary's
still do it.
a chess player, and so if you're wanting chess lessons or artisan chess boards built, he does. Are you still doing those things?
Yeah, I still do lessons. I don't know about custom making boards for people. Maybe if someone like really wanted one, but
That one you made for yourself was cool, dude.
yeah, that was pretty cool. But yeah, I'm still offering lessons. So if anyone wants lessons, they can definitely reach out.
All right, guys. I think we're gonna wrap it up. Thanks for playing, Gary. Thanks for playing, fam. We'll
Yep.
see you soon.
Yeah, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.